If this is your first time here, I am Emmanuel Deon. And let's see, can you hear me well? Because I don't have my other mic set up. All right, all right. So, as we are in the first day of the year, the first day of the month, I decided it was a great time for us to be able to talk about how to keep time. I see so many people keeping time, keeping Passover, and what would actually be the winter. And I do understand, right? Sometimes we can see things blossom and blooming, and then we say that's the new year. That doesn't necessarily constitute the new year, right? That could be a sign pointing towards the new year approaching, right? But that does not mean that spring is actually here or we've crossed over into that new month and that new year. And many of us keep time the right way. And for those who keep time the right way, praise the Most High for you all. So, again, I am Emmanuel Deon. If this is your first time here, I give all praises to the Most High and His Son, Christ, Yeshua, whatever you call Him. I am not against you, okay? But we all know who we're talking about. And I would say, which is I am that I am, and I am not against you if you use any form of tetragrammaton for the pronunciation. Some people are hardcore on that and that allow that to become what divides them. That is not who I am. Okay, so to start out, I want to go to Genesis 1 and 14. It says the lights with Genesis 1 and 14. Let me pull it up real quick. And all praises to the Most High for a new year. And Elohim said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs, and for seasons, and for days, and for years. All right? So we understand that the lights in heaven are for signs, seasons, days, and years. But for covenant people, the question is not merely astronomical. The question is, how did Torah instruct Israel to keep the appointed times? Right? I may hop around a little bit for this lesson, and that is okay. Because once I start talking, I have it planned out a certain type of way, but once I start talking, sometimes I kind of go askew from that. So when we look at antiquities, this is from nasascience.gov. It says the shift from observing the first sliver of the crescent moon to using the astronomical conjunction or dark moon began gradually but largely solidified with the establishment of a fixed rabbinical calendar around the 4th century CE, specifically roughly 358 to 359 CE. Previously, here's the point. Previous to that time, right, we began to be scattered around the earth. Historically, how we would have quantified sending out the signal for a new moon, because then you blow the shofar and you have to have witnesses, and that was a state that we performed when we were actually in Israel. But being scattered abroad, says previously, ancient cultures prior to that 358, 359 CE, ancient cultures like the Israelites, Babylonians, and Greeks determined the new moon via direct observation of the sliver. And we have to think about it, right? If it's the first sliver, that is a new moon. Literally, it can't be the dark moon because there's no moon there, right? And not only that, but the dark moon can last for several days. It cannot be the full moon. Let me show you why. I'm going to go to the English Standard Version. We're going to go to Psalms 81 and 3, if I'm not mistaken. Praise the Most High. And I'm going to read that from the ESV, English Standard Version. All right. It says, blow the trumpet at the new moon, at the full moon, or on full moon on our feast day, right? Because the full moon usually falls on the feast day, right? It's in the middle of the month, right? The full moon is usually in the middle of the month, right? It cannot be full and new, right? If it's full, that means it has come to its fullness. It's not new, right? It is in the middle. It can't be new and full. It doesn't make any sense, Okay, so we understand that the full moon is not the new moon. And for those who are teaching that the full moon is the new moon, it is a grave error. You understand? So blow the trumpet at the new moon, at the full moon, and on our feast day. It points to the first appearing of the renewed moon because in the Hebrew, idea is not dark moon, but renewal. Kodesh comes from the root to renew, to make new. And the noun itself is used for both new moon and month. That means the emphasis is the moon's reappearance as a renewed cycle, not merely an invisible astronomical conjunction. That's why Rosh Kadesh literally means head of month. Rosh Kadesh. Okay? Or beginning of the renewed cycle. In scripture, 1 Samuel 20:5 says, tomorrow is a new moon, showing it was something known and observed as an arriving day, not an unseen point nobody could detect by sight. Right? So this is dispelling the dark moon and the full moon. Another problem with the full moon. A problem with the full moon is that it can be 98%, 97%, 99%, but it's really hard to gauge by eyesight when that is. But the first sliver of the moon, we can clearly see it by it appearing from the darkness, it appearing to be the first light. All right? Even older Jewish commentary says this plainly on 1 Samuel 20:5. Rashi explains it as the renewal of the moon. Shadush Havana. The wording leans toward the moon being seen in renewed form. A thing is called renewed when it appears again. So the Hebrew line of the thought is the moon as Yariach, the object, the Kodesh, renewed lunar cycle, new moon, or month. Hebrew straightforwardly argue for those who read the Hebrew straightforwardly, argue that Kadesh points naturally to the first visible sliver. The month begins when the moon is renewed to sight. The invisible conjunction may be a calculation, but renewal in plain language fits manifestation, not hiddenness. Okay, this is also reflected in the standard lexical summaries that define Kodesh as the new moon, and by implication, the month beginning from it. The meaning points to the first sliver because Kodesh is about renewal, and renewal is recognized when the moon shows itself again. An invisible moon is concealed. A visible sliver is renewed before our eyes. All right, so if the month starts at the full moon, then the moon is already far along in its visible development on day one. That means the so-called new moon is already old in its cycle. Okay, so it can't be a new moon and a full moon because a full moon isn't new because it's full. It takes time, it takes days, it takes weeks for it to arrive at the full moon status. It's impossible. So for those teaching that, I know for many of us, and even for myself, I'm guilty of it as well. Once something has been taught and we have been found to be in error, then sometimes we have to die on that sword. And may the Most High bless me to be a good example of that when I am wrong, to be able to take responsibility of being wrong and accountability of being wrong and shift. You understand, the world is not going to blow up. We're not going to dissipate. We're not going to spontaneously combust, but we will continue to live. Okay, and nothing's going to happen otherwise, and we're going to take responsibility and accountability for what we taught and corrected, right? So that we're in alignment with the Most High and not with our ego. That means the so-called new moon is already old in its cycle. That clashes with the meaning of Kadesh. Okay? In a Hebrew sense, Kadesh means renewed month, renewed moon or cycle. Rosh Kadesh, which we talked about, both of these, head of the renewed cycle. The head of the thing is its start, not its midpoint or peak. All right? The beginning of a thing is not the midpoint. right? That's just like we all understand, and this is a perfect example. We all understand that a new day starts in the at the at dusk, right? So it starts at the beginning of night. And while the heathen has thought to change times, which is in the book of Daniel, right? They have thought to change times to the middle of the night, which we can also equate to the witching hour. And we know a new thing can't start in the middle. Well, we can take that same concept and we can pick it up, copy and paste it to this understanding as well, that the new moon will start there. And I understand, people will quickly move to Enoch. And this is why I push against Enoch and Jubilees, because once you start speaking Torah, then the Enoch keepers come out in conflict with that. Why? Because Enoch contradicts. It tells us that it's a 364 day year, all based on the sun, and that totally contradicts the Torah. So it's going to make us choose one. It's going to make us choose the Torah as the truth, or it's going to make us choose Enoch as the truth. The problem is, if we choose Enoch, then we then erect ourselves as judges over the Torah. It makes us judge the Torah. And when we judge the Torah, we're saying that Enoch is the standard that must be upheld. And we are saying Moses and the Torah is the standard that has bared false witness. Moses and the Torah is what is in error. This couldn't be further from the truth. I will go further than that to even say that for those who are pushing for Christ to have been an Essene, I have heard this too. And this is the major contradiction that I see within it. The major contradiction that I see is that those from the Qumran and people will hurry up and run to them, but ancient does not necessarily mean correct, especially if it conflicts with Torah. So for those who run to the Qumran and then they run to Enoch and they run to Jubilees, right? These calendars contradict. Not only that, but the Essenes were to have believed in two messiahs, right? They didn't believe in just one messiah. They believed in staying on the outskirts. They didn't believe in intermixing themselves with the people. So yes, Yeshua would have several similarities with the Essenes, but I would push back on that to say no, because the foundation in which they kept themselves was in contradiction to the Torah. I do not care how old that is, because I've looked at both. I've looked at both. I've looked at that, and I've looked at the contrary. And Deuteronomy 4:2 tells us not to add to, right? It tells us not to add. So if we add anything that is contradicting or causing us to cancel, it is sin. Sin is not quantified by the transgression of Enoch. Sin is not quantified by the transgression of Jubilees. It is not. Sin is quantified by the transgression of the law, Torah. So when we look at Enoch, Jubilees, etc., they are not the source in which mentions Passover, Feast of Weeks, and everything, right? So we have a source, an original source that is telling us how to keep these things. And therefore, within its scope, it also gives us the instructions on how to keep it. Most of those works are considered pseudepigraphal. So what is pseudepigraphal? That means it is attributed to a false, it is an author acting as another author. Those books are commonly related to the second temple, right? And that's around, if I'm not mistaken, Alexander the Greek's time, right? So Enoch was the seventh from Adam, but we don't have his writing or a repeat of his writing from that time. Okay, the Enoch that we have, I'm not saying that there's not an Enoch, or I'm not saying that there's not a Jubilees, right? A correct one possibly could be, right? But when we examine them through the filter of the Torah, we can clearly see that they don't stand up, they don't align, they cause conflict. And this is the reason why we have such a great divide. And for those who have decided to go with Enoch and Jubilees, there's a great erect of pride there. You have puffed yourselves up to be judges of the law. All right, back to where I was at here. If we go to Psalms 81:3, back to that, it says, "Blow the trumpet at the new moon, at the full moon, on our feet." So there we see a complete distinguish. It is distinguished between the two. All right. So we can clearly see a visible lunar cycle moves like this. We have the hidden dark, right? We have the first appearance. We have the growing light. We have the full moon, and we have the waning hidden again. So we can see that the full moon does not fit the new moon. Calling the full moon the new moon would be calling a fully grown fruit a blossom. The blossom is the beginning stage. The ripe fruit is the developed stage. All right, and we see the same issue here with the first sliver matches beginning or reappearance. So the equinox, right? The equinox is not the Torah standard, but at the same time, the equinox by the ancients was used as a marker, right? It was used as a marker. Philo says this. Philo is an ancient Jew, okay? He's an ancient Jew, and he aligns with the writings of Moses and expounds on that writing. Philo says it directly in like this: in the life of Moses 2.222. He says the beginning of the vernal equinox is the first month of the year. That is about explicit as it gets, right? So for those who have kept Passover in early in March, before in between the new moons, because you're going off of Enoch, right? You've erected Enoch as an idol to unalign you with Torah. You're in grave mistake. It is a grave error in what you're doing. It is a grave error in what you're doing. Josephus also ties Nisan or Passover to the spring turning. Spring turning would also be spring equinox, right? It is not the fact that we're saying the equinox determines it, or it is anchored in Torah. What we're saying is that it acts as a witness. Okay, it acts as a witness, a sign. Okay, Josephus also ties Nisan Passover to the spring turning. In Antiquities 3.10.5, he says Nisan is the beginning of the year and places Passover on the 14th of that month when the sun is in Aries. In ancient language, that is spring equinoctial frame, equinoctial. I guess I'm saying that right. Framing, not winter. He also ties that month to Israel's deliverance from Egypt. There is also an important early witness preserved by Eusebius. He says that earlier Jewish writers explaining Exodus taught that the Passover offering should be made after the vernal equinox. So we have the vernal equinox, which usually happens within the 12th month. And so once that happens, we are able to look at the first sliver of the moon, marking that new territory. Shalom, shalom. Thank you, Aki. I appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate it. All right. He even preserved Aristobulus, saying not only the sun, but also the moon had to be in equinoctial segment for Passover. That shows this was not a late Christian invention. It was already part of Jewish calendrical reasoning. So the straight answer, we have Philo, Josephus, and Eusebius. That is not proof. Like I said, Torah itself commands using the equinox, but we also know how to use it as a witness. All right. But it does prove that Second Temple and early Jewish interpretation did use the spring equinox as a real boundary marker for the first month and Passover. Okay, so let's continue. So we have several scriptures, right? We have Exodus 12:2. This month shall be the beginning of month for you. We have Exodus 13:4. Israel left Egypt in the month of Abib. We have Exodus 34:18. Unleavened bread is tied to the month of Abib. So us keeping time the correct way also puts us on the correct trajectory and obedience with the Most High, because we know that the transgression of the law is sin. So this is how we align ourselves so that we are not operating in sin, but in sync, right? Not sin, but sync. Deuteronomy 16:1 tells us, observe the month of Abib and keep the Passover. So nowhere here do we have a command to follow Enoch. Nowhere here do we have a command to follow the dark moon, or nowhere here do we have a follow a fixed solar chart. There is no fixed solar chart. Okay, Torah is the standard. All right, so the command is to guard the month of Abib, and the moon witnesses the month. The season witnesses the spring. The land witnesses Abib, and the equinox witnesses the seasonal turn. Okay, so the first visible sliver in ancient Israel and later Jewish practice fixed the month by the first visible crescent, not the dark conjunction. So we have witnesses that testify to the new moon. The court examined them, and also too, you can also look at this in the Sanhedrin. All right, I think it's like Sanhedrin 12. And let me look at your question here. It says, how do we reconcile the equinox with scripture? A lot of people know that word doesn't appear in scripture, and the Enochian calendar is based on it and excludes the use of the new moon. So that's what I was saying earlier, Iron Line. I was just saying that it is used throughout antiquity. It was only used as a marker, as a witness sign, right? For them to be able to see when the turning of the seasons would be. Going in from one season to the next. They counted four turnings, right? So the four turnings would be each season, right? You have, each season, winter, summer, spring, fall. So all of those seasons had their own turning. So it was only used as a witness, right? Because usually that can start in the 12th month, or this time it is in sync with the new moon as well. So the spring equinox would happen March 20th, right? And the new moon was March 20th as well. And as far as Enoch, the Enochian calendar, I think you probably kind of touched on it here, that calendar it doesn't align with Torah, so it makes you choose one. It innately is going to make you choose one and accuse one. So if I choose Enoch, I'm accusing the Torah of being false. I'm saying, I'm accusing the Torah of being in error. If I choose Torah, then I'm also accusing Enoch of being in error and out of alignment. So that is my answer on that. Hopefully that answers that for you. And in this recording, I showed several examples, like with Philo, Josephus, and what was the other guy? Eusebius. That's his name, Eusebius. I've shown of their example in antiquities how they used the spring equinox. So again, I'm not saying that it is a Torah standard. Okay, I'm definitely not saying that that Torah commands that, because I'd be violating the very words that I'm saying that others may violate, Deuteronomy 4:2. All I'm saying is that the ancients used it as a marker and as a witness for the turning of seasons, but we still have to go with the new moon. So what I'm proposing is, I guess, is that the sun and the moon were used in some type of way. It wasn't just just the moon solely or the sun solely. How does time change according to the Bible? And can you clarify your question when you say how does time change according to the Bible? You said Israel is locked into following what they think. Genesis 1 is saying, how does time change according to the Bible? Israel is locked into. Right. Let me see. I'm trying to understand the question. How does time change? The way that time goes according to the Bible, if you're talking about months, is it evening or morning or morning and evening? It's evening and morning. It will be evening and morning consistently, the same way that it is in Genesis chapter 1. And I think that even the new moon kind of aligns with that as well, because we can see the beginning of a new month with that new moon at evening a lot of times. Sometimes the moon is visible during the day as well, but yeah, I would say it would be evening and morning, because the scriptures show that consistently. Unless you have something that you believe contradicts that, then we can look at that together. Yeah, so it would start at dusk. The new days always start at dusk, just like in Genesis 1, like you said. It always says the evening and the morning. Are you familiar with time changing from morning to evening? Um, no, you can present that to me if you like, and we can look at it. Um, I think I may have heard some arguments say that before, but I don't. I can't say that I look at it as holding weight. Let me see. In the end of the Sabbath, as it began to dawn toward the first day of the week, came Mary Magdalene of the other Mary. All right, so let's look at that scripture. Dawn starts with, I would say, even before examining this scripture, I would say nothing changes the legal framework. Matthew 28 is not able to change the legal framework that the Torah already sets in place. That, I think that's why it's important to understand what the Torah sets in place. The reason why I say that is because, and I spoke on this before. Even before I get ready to look at the scripture, I would say this, right? Nothing overturns what the reason why we have the word Genesis, right, means beginning, right? It's also our instructions to study it first. Once we understand the parameters and the framework that is being set there, it's immovable throughout the entire Bible. So even if we come across something in the New Testament that seems to cancel out or contradict what is in the Old Testament or within the Torah, it's impossible. And let me explain to you why. Because within America, we have a framework like this. We have a legal framework. And the way that legal framework works is like, if I have a law, right? Let's say we have a judgment, and this law is in place. The only way that that law is moved, it has to be overturned. Has to be overturned by a higher court or a later court. That also points to this. The second thing that points to is that the fact that that law was not good enough, right? There was a stronger truth that came afterwards. So we'd have to be saying both of those things in order for any scripture within any context to overturn what was in the beginning. We'd have to say that a higher court has overturned it. There is no higher court. It comes from the Most High. It's impossible, right? We also have to say that there was a stronger truth than what was presented to us before, and that can't be either. So, with that being said, let's look at this one. Let me pull it up. It says, from the morning until the evening, the time has changed. Okay, I understand what you're saying. We still, nothing can overturn it. All of the understanding, once you read it in the beginning, all of the understanding has to fit the context of the beginning. It's impossible, because then we be saying that there is a truth that overturns the former truth. This is never going to happen. That makes the Bible inconsistent. That makes the Bible contradict. That makes one truth of the Bible lesser and the other truth of the Bible more, and it's impossible. All right, I'm gonna look at these scriptures real quick. All right. So when I'm looking at Matthew 28:1, what the verse is describing is the approach of daylight on the first day, not a legal start of the first day itself. A day can already be in progress before the dawn arrives. And let's look at Matthew 28:1 so I can look at it here. I'll just look at it real time. My phone is about to die. Matthew 28:1. It says, in the end of the Sabbath, as it began to dawn toward the first week. All right. The word dawn means begin growing light. That just means that the day is in progress already. That does not mean that there's a new day. As it began to dawn toward the first day of the week, came Mary Magdalene and the other Mary to see. That does not change. That does not change Genesis 1. So if you're presenting this, then what do you do with Genesis 1? How can that change? It's impossible. A day can already be in progress before dawn arrives. This is the whole point. In the biblical order, the first day began the previous evening. And by the time dawn comes, you're in the morning portion of a day that already started. It's no different than saying at sunrise on Tuesday. Sunrise does not make Tuesday begin. It just means sunrise is within Tuesday. The phrase began to dawn toward the first day is speaking from the perspective of visible light appearing. It is describing what they saw, and that's still in alignment with Genesis and the evening and the morning. So it describing the morning doesn't mean that the morning is that first day. It doesn't mean that at all. Leviticus 23:32, it says, from even unto even shall ye celebrate your Sabbath. That's Leviticus 23:32. The Torah tells us from even unto even. Exodus 12:18 also give feast reckoning from even to even. So when we look at Matthew 28:1, it cannot be used to overthrow the plain Torah pattern. It can't overthrow it. Because what you're presenting here is that we overthrow the previous knowledge because the latter knowledge will overturn it. It's not going to overturn. It's not going to overturn. Okay. So, and let's look at the other scripture. I'll look at one more because I got to get ready to transition to the class for the kids. We're looking at Ecclesiasticus, 18 and 26. That's why it's important to understand the legal framework. This is why it's important to understand Torah before accusing Torah of being a lie, before accusing or saying that Sirach even has the power to overturn. He don't have the power to overturn nothing because he's not sitting on a throne. It says, so this verse, I've got it pulled up here, from morning until the evening, the time has changed and all things are soon done before the Lord. That is this right here. It's a statement about changing time through the day, not a legal definition of when a day begins. This is not a legal definition. It does not change. The verse is observing how quickly conditions shift from morning to evening. Okay, it's about the passing and mutuality of life and time before the Most High. It's not laying down a calendar law. Everything that the Bible is built upon is Torah truth. You can't change these things. To change them is extremely dangerous because you're moving things. You're saying that the Most High made a mistake. You're saying that there's a higher court, right? This is what you're saying. You're saying that there's a court that is supreme to the Supreme Court. There is no court supreme to the Most High sitting on a throne. What he established in Genesis 1 has to be the parameter. It has to be the border that all understanding fits within. You can't change that. All right? So the key difference here, in my observation, is this is descriptive observation of time passing versus legal reckoning of when a day begins. Sirach 18 and 26 is descriptive. So Leviticus 23 and 32, I'll go back to the Torah framing because we are not contradicting what Torah is saying because you're giving me two different truths. So it's either one aligns with the other or the other accuses the other of being a lie. It's either alignment or accusation. Leviticus 23 and 32 says, from even unto even shall ye celebrate your Sabbath. It's telling you from even unto even. The same with Exodus 12 and 8. It says, in the first month, on the 14th day of the month, at even, until the 120th day of the month at even. This is Exodus 12 and 8. This is the legal framework that you must learn first. So if you have been twisted or if you have been misguided to think that there is a later law, then you have not given enough time to the beginning. The fear of the Lord is the beginning. You haven't given yourself enough time in the legal framework of things to be able to establish the legal framework that you have to operate in. This is why I say all the time, many of us have not given ourselves fully to Torah before we've given ourselves to other truths. Torah is the foundation. It cannot move. Okay? It can't move. Again, we have a day boundary language at even. So if for Sirach 18:26 to argue morning to even, it can't. The verse says time changes from morning to even. It does not say the day begins in the morning. And not only that, but Sirach has no authority over the lawgiver. He has to operate within the lawgiver. See, the whole Bible is Torah framework. This is why so many of us get chopped up. That's like saying from noon until sunset means the day starts at noon. So if I say from 12 until 7, that does not mean that the day starts at 12. Or from even until midnight means the day starts in the evening just because the part of the day was mentioned. Just because it's mentioned here does not mean that it's changing the legal framework that has been set in the beginning. That's bad reasoning. That reasoning is not good and it's not clear. Mentioning a span of time does not define the calendar boundary. Notice, if Sirach wanted to define the day as morning to even, it would need to say something like the day begins in the morning or give legal observance language. It doesn't. Sirach doesn't do that. It's talking about how fast things change and pass away before the Creator. So 18 and 26 is about the movement of time within the day, not the start of the day. Torah still defines the day from the evening. So what 18 and 26 describes is time passing from morning to evening. Leviticus 23 and 32 defines time keeping from evening to evening, and Genesis 1 defines it from evening to morning. You can't move that. All of your understanding has to fall within that. That's my answer on all of that and all of the scriptures. And you will give no scripture that will contradict that because you can't contradict the Bible. It has to align with the legal framework. All right. So otherwise than that, that is my answer to every last one of these scriptures that you have put up. It won't change. No scripture is going to undo the legal framework that the whole Bible is built upon. Just like we have the Constitution. Right? You can't not have a law that undoes the Constitution. A kingdom is built on its legal framework. So you accept it or you don't. It's up to you. But that makes no sense. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and log off of here. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I really appreciate you. And Shabbat Shalom.